This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Say what you just said again for the record this time.
I just said people get naked and taking a shit on a seat. What's that about? Like, I don't even understand.
Right. Who gets naked on an airplane and just poops in the fucking seat?
Yeah,
well,
and then decides to drop a deuce.
I think that's it
that
may not
evades
be
logic for me.
It may not be a segue, but God dang it, I'm going to use it as a segue to talk about today's topic. And I don't even know how we got off on this the other day, but we started talking about narcissists and realized we haven't done really a deep dive onto that at all. We talk about it all the time, it seems. And when I Googled it, this is what really tripped me out, man, is I'm far from stripping naked and shitting on a airplane seat, but I might be a narcissist based on what Google says.
Yeah.
But that's also kind of like WebMD, you stump your toe, you got cancer kind of thing. So
it's interesting that you say that because, and we'll get into this obviously, but I think we all may demonstrate narcissistic traits at certain times.
Yes.
That doesn't mean we're a narcissist necessarily, right?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And that's the way I read the list too. So just because, and I would throw that out maybe as a pre-warning or I don't know, trigger warning to the listeners.
Yeah.
Just because we're naming off a bunch of shit on here, we're not calling you guys narcissists. I would, however, ask you to do some of that self-inspection shit and see if, maybe 3 out of the 5 apply to you, and then, maybe take a real good hard look.
And I think it's repeated behavior over time too, right? And a lot of it is, again, we can get into this. I don't want to jump the gun because I don't know exactly where you want to go with this conversation, but I think this is a good conversation because, right.
That's
what was
funny.
I thinking?
That's
right,
hilarious. I have direction.
Let me frame the conversation then. So I think it's important that we, 1, define what narcissism is, 2, talk about what the traits of narcissism are, and then 3, how to recognize those traits, and 4, how to maybe manage those traits. Not manage them, but how do you respond to those traits, right? So luckily for me, I have a really smart wife who does this work. And so I was able to get some information from her. But I think it's important to talk about to a certain extent, though, because the word narcissism, it gets thrown around a lot in social contexts and just in society in general today. And I don't know how well people even understand it, right? So I think I'm gonna start with a disclaimer up front because I was told by my wife to do this. So there is something called narcissistic personality disorder, right? And it's in the DSM-5, which is their diagnostic manual that they use to figure out what issues people have.
Nerd alert. Okay.
But what's important to stress is that it's only like 5% or less of the population that actually has narcissistic personality disorder. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who demonstrate narcissistic traits. And I don't remember what the criteria is, but in order to have narcissistic personality disorder, there's 14 traits or something like that, and you have to have so many of those traits to yes, you have narcissistic personality disorder. That doesn't mean that there aren't people that lean towards narcissism, or don't have some of these traits that are just kind of overarching traits in their individual personalities.
Yeah.
And that's still a valid conversation to have, right? What are the traits? How do you recognize them? And then what can you do if you're in a relationship with somebody like that? So
Yeah, I think the sciencey shit's going to be really cool, man, because I know I'll learn something from it, and I'm sure the listeners will too. But, the everyday, just kind of anecdotal discussion, I think, is going to be equally enlightening, because I believe that probably all of us at some point, and I would venture to guess, I hope that we get into this later, but I would venture to guess that guys like you and I, um, the blunt end of the spoon, if you will, not the sharp end of the stick, but the blunt end of the spoon, as we were once upon a time. Those type A's, we probably exhibit more than one of these. And I would not necessarily classify us as narcissist.
Yeah.
I'd say that we bridge. There's a fine line between arrogant and cocky. There's a fine line between, having aspirations and being consumed by delusions of grandeur. There's,
Yeah.
and so I think hopefully we get into some of that stuff as we go, and just
Sure.
tell the stories of all that. But please go with the sciencey stuff first.
Well, I would say, I'll just give you the clinical definition. So the clinical definition of narcissistic personality disorder is a mental condition characterized by a persistent pattern of grandiosity, need for admiration, and lack of empathy that typically begins by early adulthood and presents in various contexts.
Yeah, I think you just described Roscoe as what you did.
But the key, honestly, from my conversation with Alicia, and she's not a narcissist expert, but I think the biggest piece of what I just described is that lack of empathy.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that I'm super important, I'm entitled to these certain things. People want to be like me, or I see other people that have things and I should have those things because that's how important I am. And I have no empathy either. So I'm going to use and manipulate people in any way I can to make sure that I get those things that I think I need or that I deserve, kind of a thing.
That's really interesting when we take a look at the younger generations that are coming up right now. And there's I think more of I hate to throw a blanket over them, but I would say that, generally speaking, there's more of an entitlement, a sense of entitlement with some of the younger generations than maybe like our generations and above. Certainly the boomers, and the greatest generation, and then maybe even us, where we still had this idea of the American dream, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work hard for it, or you don't deserve it, that kind of stuff. Whereas, like, I see it in my kids occasionally where, when they turned 18, they expected to have a big house, drive a nice truck, and have a 60-inch TV. Well, dude, like, life doesn't work like that,
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's, I don't know. I'm sure we'll get into some of the causes of it.
So that's important. So let me get a little sciencey for a second too. So there are genetic factors. In one article I read, it said twin studies suggest that narcissism has a heritability rate of about 50%, meaning that genetic factors contribute substantially to the development of narcissistic traits. But parenting styles also play a role. And this may be, in some ways,
nature nurture.
Yeah. Well, this may be why we see some of this stuff, right? Because if you go back and for the younger listeners, they might not understand this, but older listeners will, right? We were key latch kids, right? Or whatever they called us, because our parents were gone and they gave us a key to the house and we just kind of came and gone.
Yeah. Be home before dark. Yep.
Yeah. We did what we wanted to do, right? And then you had, the helicopter parents, right? That are always hovering, making sure everything's okay, making sure everything's safe. And then you've got the snowplow parents, that, I mean, the draft is a perfect example if you want to talk about Sanders, right?
Oh, yes.
Whose dad has cleared the path and every obstacle out of his son's way for his entire life so that he's never had to deal with any adversity or face any resiliency.
That was so beautiful.
And he's brought up to believe that he is the best thing that's ever happened to football in the quarterback position because daddy's made it so, right?
Can we just stay on that for a second? Because no. There's a reason here. That's a perfect case study, man. Like, that is a perfect case study in oh gosh. I'm gonna get rocks thrown at me for saying this, but parenting gone wrong. You do it with the best of intentions, right? But you don't expose your kids to the hardships so that they can learn the lessons that they need to survive.
That's
right. And I've said this, gosh, man, I've said this over and over and over again, that if I don't teach the students the players that are on my team, my kids, if I don't teach them those hardships, real life will.
Yeah.
And it'd be so much better if it came from me, because I can tailor that message a little bit. I can spread that message over time, spread the peanut butter a little thinner if I need to. I can pick them up and dust them off and give them another chance.
You can help teach those resiliency skills and all of that stuff.
But guess what? Real life just hit Sanders in the face.
For the first time, it appears.
Yeah. And guess what? He's not handling it well.
Nope. Well, and so my point in bringing that story up in particular, though, is they found that certain parenting styles lead to narcissistic traits, right? So overvaluation, parents who excessively praise and overly indulge their children may
Everybody gets a
foster
trophy. Yep.
an inflated sense of self-importance, right? And this goes back to your point. If you're seeing some of this maybe out of the younger generation, it may be that shift too, of everybody gets a trophy,
Yep.
That type of thing. Or neglect and abuse, right? So conversely, neglectful or abusive parenting can lead to the development of narcissistic traits as a coping mechanism to deal with low self-esteem and lack of a secure attachment, which low self-esteem is, we'll talk about when we talk about the traits of narcissism. That's a big one, right? So oftentimes people that have narcissistic traits have very low self-esteem. And so they try to project this image to the world that there's something that they're not, because they're not uncomfortable with themselves. They haven't done that self-inspection. They don't have that self-awareness. They haven't done that work.
Potentially they haven't been taught. They haven't been given a chance to learn that, because, somebody kept fighting their battles for them or setting them on a pedestal when they maybe didn't deserve it, and they haven't had a chance to learn some of that stuff yet. So connect the dots, right? What leads to low self-esteem is in this case is probably coming from a little bit of real life showing you a degree of failure. Like, you don't just graduate high school and make $100,000 a year. You have to do things, right? And then 10 years after high school, you're still living in a single wide down here in the ghetto, and you got 6 babies, and you can't understand where your life went wrong, and you feel really glum about your situation. Well, guess what, dude? It's like your parents probably didn't put you in a great position because the snowplow thing, right? Remember that whole, there was like 10 years there where it was all about, the snowflakes. Everybody was picking on the snowflakes about getting butt hurt easy. Well, where did they develop that snowflake attitude about I'm unique and I'm special and nobody's like me and I should be,
Well, here's interesting.
The parents and society propped them up too much.
Well, so here's societal and cultural influences. It says that societies that emphasize individualism, competition, and material success, which, again, if you go back to this generation, with social media and the emphasis on everybody's best day, everybody's successful, everybody's doing better than you.
Yeah,
I'm an influencer. Look how great my life is, and I'm 23 years old.
Always a comparison.
And who knows? Yeah, it's that comparison society, right? So those create environments where narcissistic traits are more likely to flourish. So
yeah, that makes complete sense, man. I mean, every time you pick up your little Andy Stump called this. I love this. I'm going to steal it from him. He called it your little anxiety rectangle. Every time you pick that thing up and stare at it, somebody's putting on a picture about, well, hell, I just posted a couple pictures the other day. Katie and I just celebrated our 25th anniversary, and
Congratulations.
Thanks. I put up a couple of pictures of us from our trip to Europe a couple of months ago. And it was like a picture in front of Big Ben and in front of a museum or whatever. But, we're all smiling and everything's happy and shit. But what they didn't see was, Katie having to take Motrin every 6 hours because her back was killing her, and my feet were hurting like crazy because we were walking like 6 miles a day, and I hate crowds, so I'm generally grumpy. But for one picture, I can put on a smile.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anyways, those are kind of some of the, I guess, influences from a scientific standpoint of narcissism. But we can talk about traits if you want from there.
Yeah, jump in, man.
So the first trait that they talk about is like fantasies of greatness or grandiose sense of self-importance, right? So somebody that may exaggerate their achievements and talents or expect to be recognized as superior without matching accomplishments. The bottom line is narcissists typically obsessed with fantasies of greatness. They may daydream about being the most successful person, powerful or attractive. and those fantasies are actually what drive their behavior and decisions. So that preoccupation can result in a lack of focus on real world tasks in relationships, leading to disappointment and frustration when reality doesn't match their fantasy of themselves, right? So they typically have this idea of self-importance, this fantasy of they're way more valuable, way better at whatever they're doing than they actually are, right?
Is this above and beyond what we have generally termed on this show anyways as an ego, as an arrogant ego?
So if we go back to the scientific part of it, they actually point out that Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical theory suggests that narcissism originates from early childhood experiences in the development of the ego. According to this theory, if an individual's needs are either excessively gratified or severely neglected during childhood, they may develop narcissistic traits as a defense mechanism. So let's go to the example of Shade, right? So somebody who everything's been given to them, right? The traits that they have been excessively gratified, have been they've been told their whole lives that they're better than everybody. I mean, I think I heard at one point that Dion, his nickname for him was Rome, right. So but to him, like, think about it, man. If you're a kid and your dad, who is like the person that you look up to, who was
that's tough, man,
a pro player
right.
in baseball and football, has all these accolades, has achieved all this greatness in, sports, you're looking up to this guy and he's telling you that you're the best thing that's ever happened and you're going to be the best quarterback that ever lived, or whatever the messaging was. Like, you are going to internalize that. We talk about this all the time, dude. What's the messaging that you've had in your life? And sometimes it's good, like sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's bad, and so you got a guy here who maybe has had messaging his whole life that he's something more than he actually is. Like, he has a belief in himself that he is actually greater at doing what he actually does. Because you go back and you look at the scout reports and stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, he's okay. He's not the best quarterback we've ever seen in a draft before. He's not, the next coming of Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, Tom Brady didn't get drafted high anyways, but, he's not like one of the greats that we've ever seen. That doesn't mean he couldn't develop into that necessarily, but the story that he's had, and I'm not saying he's a narcissist, but I'm just saying the story that he's had his whole life, like, that's an example, right? So where you have this grandiose idea of self-importance, you're more important than you actually are. Like, I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, I think the word mediocre was floated around during the draft for him. And the thing that's going to end up killing him, I believe, time will tell. But what I believe is this is going to be such a shock to his system, and he doesn't have the tools in his toolkit to be able to overcome. He's going to go into it probably with a pissy attitude because he thinks that he should be the starter day one. Yeah. And that's probably going to ultimately be his downfall, is he won't go in there with a humble attitude into the QB room and go, guys, I'm here to learn. I don't want to play for like 2 years. I need to play behind a Flacco so that I can learn the game. Right. Yeah. And then, maybe Flacco hangs him up and he's got his chance, shoot your shot kind of thing. But I just don't see that out of him. I see his dad calling the GM is what I see.
Yeah. Well, and even to a larger extent too, I could see something, and this is all hypothetical, so I'm not bagging on the kid because I don't even know him, but why wouldn't he think that?
That's valid.
You know what I mean? Like, his whole life, that's what he's been told. His whole life, that's what he's been led to believe.
And you
they retired his number at Colorado. I mean, so,
dude, I don't think it's wrong that he has that level of self-confidence.
I'm not talking about self-confidence. No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying that's of course, he's going to think that way. That's what he's been fed his whole life. That's the messaging he's always had.
And that's cool. But if there were another plate on the side to be fed from, so to speak, that was knock you down a peg every now and then.
But what you're describing goes perfectly into like the second trait, which is the belief that they are special and unique.
Well, okay, hold that for a second because I wanted to go back. I'm reading along as you're reading your list. I'm reading my list, and there was one on here. I don't think that. Well, maybe you said it, but you said you used different words. But it says preoccupation with success, maybe preoccupied with fantasies about unlimited success, power,
Yeah.
brilliance, beauty, or perfect love.
That's the preoccupation with fantasies,
right? And all I was going to note on that was that is not to say don't be ambitious.
No.
And want to step out, and how many times have we said, step out of your comfort zone, try new things, get uncomfortable. Like,
so let me break this down for you, dude. An example of somebody who maybe has narcissistic traits, who has this preoccupation with fantasies, as opposed to a regular person who may be striving towards a goal, would be, I'm a great singer. I sing in church every Sunday. Everybody loves when I sing in church every Sunday. I'm going to go record a song. So maybe they go record a song, right? And then they just expect greatness. They expect all these things to fall in their lap. All the work that has to be done to get to where they want to go.
Yeah.
Going to a Nashville, going to Vegas, going to some place, going to California, in playing in small venues and
on the corner,
right? Like building a following, and beating on the doors of record executives. And they don't want to do any of that. They expect that to be given to them. They don't want to do the work. They expect these things to just kind of fall in their lap because they have this fantasy that that's the kind of person they are. And because they're that person, those things should just happen. They're not going to do the fucking work.
Right. And I think that's the key right there, right? That last piece that you said. Because I'll be the first one to admit, man, that sometimes I sit here and daydream. I'm trying to get really good at writing these stories, and I see authors that I admire and storytellers that I look up to and that I try to learn from. I got right here, I got my Stephen King book about how to write good. I just read it this week. But I'll sit here and daydream sometimes when I see those guys doing book signings and going on book tours and posting their things on social media about, they're traveling, doing research for their next story. Bye, Felicia.
I'm just some water.
But at the same time, I'm not sitting here going, well, if I write it, they will come.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Because I really understand that, well, A, I don't believe I'm that good. And B, I know that there's more to it than just write it and get it picked up. Dude, I've already got a list of rejections from stuff that I've written, and that's expected, I think.
Well, but that's the difference between you, who has humility and isn't wrapped up in your own ego, and somebody who has a grandiose idea of self-importance.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm pretty important. And so far you're describing Roscoe on this. I'm trying to dig myself out of a hole and make myself feel better so that my self-esteem goes up a little bit.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks.
So, but what we were talking about plays into the second one, which is belief that they are special and unique, right? So they think they're special, and they think that they can only be understood by other special or high status people. This belief can lead them to associate only with people they perceive to be equally special or high in status. It can create an elitist attitude, making it difficult for them to form genuine connections with a diverse range of people. And it can also lead to feelings of isolation because they feel like people are beneath them and they don't roll in those high status circles. Right?
Yeah, that's a big thing, man. And it's a fine line too. And I found myself treading this line a little bit in the last couple of years. And it's
because you're too good for me. You're too good for me, Roscoe.
No, the opposite, dude.
I'm joking, dude.
In my workspace, there's, I don't know, 35 of us, maybe a few more, maybe close to 40 now. And there might be maybe 10 total that I think I'm intellectually, peers with them. Everybody else, I'm like, but that's what keeps me like learning and doing this show with you and you challenging me to sit here and fucking read about narcissist behavior, and study all this stuff. Like that challenges me, right? But But on the other side of that, right, I enjoy that. I enjoy the challenge of trying to sound like I know what the fuck I'm talking about sometimes.
Yeah.
That comes at the expense, though, sometimes of hanging out with people who don't want to talk about that kind of shit.
Sure.
You know, we just want to sit around the campfire and fucking hoot and holler and sing Leonard Skinner and do that kind of stuff. Because I enjoy that intellectual challenge so much, some of those relationships get put to the side a little bit.
Sure.
So that's a fine balance, man.
It is, but at least you're trying to find that balance, and you're not seeking that intellectual stimulation because, like, I don't know that a narcissistic person would seek intellectual. They're not seeking these things for intellectual stimulation, right? They have an underlying belief that they're special and unique, and that they're more special and unique than the people around them, right?
Okay, you're making me feel a little bit better about myself.
Yeah.
So all right.
And I'm not a therapist, so
I'll call Alicia.
Yeah,
I think I saw her in the gym this morning. Actually,
she might have been there.
I think I saw her running on the treadmill, but I was in a hurry and I couldn't stop. So
she might have been there.
Bye-bye.
The third thing is need for excessive admiration. Narcissists crave constant admiration and validation. They often seek out praise and compliments to reinforce their self-esteem. This goes back to they usually have low self-esteem. And so they look for ways to feel better about themselves. It's kind of like I'm doing with you right now.
No, I'm sitting here thinking about like a day in the life of a fighter squadron. Like, dude, if you're doing that job for a pat on the back, you're in the wrong fucking business, bro.
I don't think narcissists would survive in a fighter squadron.
All we do is beat the shit out of each other all the time.
Right. And this need can be exhausting for those around them who feel pressure to provide continuous validation. It can also lead to manipulation or exploitation of others to obtain admiration.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, everybody loves a pat on the back, man.
Sure.
I mean, it makes you feel good, right? If that's the reason you're doing the things that you're doing, you're probably in it for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you're doing it for the plaque on the wall, if you're doing it for the recognition, if you're doing it for the attention, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right?
Well, I mean, and here's like reality, right? I'm sitting here looking around my room and I have a fair amount of plaques on the wall and I have some big ass trophies and things. And dude, it wasn't 3 or 4 days ago. Katie and I were sitting back here, just talking, and I was looking around. I said, Katie, I'm about to strip this room. I'm about to strip it. I'm going to leave a couple of lithos on the wall, and because none of this shit matters.
Yeah.
Like, it's just stuff, right? And it needs to go in a box in the attic. And I just want to simplify. I'd rather have a bigger bookshelf than to have all this shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's a byproduct of good work you've done, but it's not the reason that you did the good work.
It is. It's proof that you put in work. Like I'm looking at a football trophy that's about 5 feet tall, and it says undefeated champion on it. And when I look at that trophy, and that's one thing that I do like about sitting back here in my room, is everything that I see, there's a story behind it, right? And it brings back a memory. And I can sit back here and just look at a picture on the wall and take a trip down memory lane and remember some good times. Right. But when I look at that trophy, I remember the 6 months of fucking hard work and discipline and preparation and patience and strategy, that went into that, and those long days and long nights of studying game film and things like that. So it's proof that you put in the work, that you did the effort. When you write the end at the end of a book and you go, okay, I put in the work, know?
I would imagine too that trophy generates memories of the relationships that were built over the course of that season, right? And the kids that you worked with, and
kids that still come to my house to this day.
The relationships that were built. So a narcissist wouldn't see it that way, right? One, they wouldn't have the trophy. Two, they would never go out of the way to build those relationships. There would just be this underlying expectation that because they were the coach, they deserve the trophy.
No, therein lies the problem, right? If you're not willing to do the work, you don't deserve the trophy.
Exactly. And guess what they would do? They would go, oh, well, yeah, we didn't win, but it's not my fault. It's because the coaches that were working for me sucked. And I had a bunch of shitty kids that didn't want to work out or get better, or like there would be a ton of excuses, right? So,
yeah, I read this book one time from Rick Pitino. He was I think it was Kentucky Wildcats. Yeah, he was Kentucky Wildcats coach way back when. They won a whole bunch of national championships and shit. And he read. I picked it up at Goodwill for like $1 and read through it. It's called The Keys to Success by Rick Pitino. And like number one on the list was, if you don't do the work, you don't deserve victory.
Yeah.
Period. Like, you could be in the fourth quarter, game's tied, and if you didn't do the work, you don't deserve to win, man.
Well, and here's
Sorry.
why I think you'll find that a lot of narcissists don't do the work. And that's because one of the other traits is a sense of entitlement.
Yeah.
Right. So they have an unreasonable expectation of favorable treatment and automatic compliance with their wishes. They believe they deserve special treatment, and then they get mad or angry or confused when they don't receive it, right? So the sense of entitlement can lead to unreasonable demands and expectations in personal and professional relationships, causing tension and resentment. So they have the sense of entitlement, right? Like they're just owed that. Like, I'm such a great person. I have this grandiose idea of myself. I'm entitled to these things. Who are you to stand in my way? I don't want to do the work. Like I was talking about before, right? They expect those things to just fall into their lap because they're that kind of person, right? These fantasies, this idea of a grandiose self, and then entitlement on top of that. Like, you can see how this is making just a wonderful individual.
There was one on my list over here too that says exploitation of others, excessive exploitation of others, and that goes into what you're saying. It's probably underneath what you're talking about. There is, you're going to manipulate and use other people to create an advantage for yourself or to get something that you didn't earn.
Yes.
And
that's
we see that. You and I were talking about an example of that the other day with some stuff that we're noticing or that I'm noticing. And that's exactly what's going on is I see someone who's manipulating another person for their advantage.
Yeah. That's the next one, interpersonally exploited behavior.
Yeah.
It's you're exploiting other people to get what you want, right? It's coercion, basically. Manipulation, deceit, coercion to get what you want. They're master manipulators, narcissists are.
So far, I think you've described every politician in Washington right now.
Yeah, well, but here's what's hard about it, dude, is they can hide in plain sight because a lot of times that behavior presents as passive aggressive, and it is. It's passive aggressive in nature, but there's this whole underlying piece of the passive aggressive behavior that's there, that's actually driving that behavior, right? It's very manipulative.
Like,
right?
I'm listening to this series of this podcast, of this YouTube podcast. Jimmy Dorsey, I think is his name. I'd have to go look it up. Fuck, I don't even have the damn reference that I'm talking about now. But anyways, they were talking just today. I was listening to him talk about Frank Church back in the 70s. He did the Church Commission after the Warren Commission. So it was like a select committee, and they were going to go and investigate. It was like one of the first true oversight committees to look back on the JFK thing, to look back on the fuckery that's been going on with the CIA and that kind of stuff. That's what the whole show is based on, kind of the fuckery of the CIA. But what they were talking about today was back in the 70s, you had a large majority of the guys in Washington were like stand-up dudes, who just wanted to do well. And I think we look back all the way to the founders, and you see that. And it's not everybody,
Sure.
Some people get into it for selfish reasons, sure. But I think generally speaking, up until about the 60s or 70s, most of the guys who went to Washington, they had the best intentions, right? And then there was a shift somewhere in the early to mid 80s. There was a shift to where now you got what you got, 4 decades later. And I'm wondering if some of this wasn't going on, maybe it was that some of the nature nurture stuff that you talked about. Maybe it was some of the society stuff. Maybe it was just geopolitics playing out. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, they'll be exploitive, and that they're master manipulators, to try and get their needs met. That's fundamentally, that's all they're trying to do. They're just trying to get their needs met. But they can't express their needs correctly. They can't, so like, here's an example. Have you ever been in a relationship with somebody who you don't do something and they get mad and you don't know why? And then the expectation is
I'm married. Of course I have.
But the expectation is that you should be able to, well, you should have known, right? You should read my mind. Well, you know what? If you don't fucking tell me what you need, if you can't communicate it to me, how the fuck am I supposed to know? But a narcissist would have that expectation, right? You should know what I need. I shouldn't have to tell you. You know what I need.
Yeah, I don't think Katie's a narcissist, but I've been married. I've been married long enough that that game gets played every now and then in our house from both. All right,
Yeah,
I will own it.
but
because
that's also
I
over
play that
25
card.
years of
It is
behavioral patterns between the two of you, where maybe there would be an expectation that she should know or you should know.
You should know that I'm horny all the time. I mean, we've
right?
been through this.
Anyways, and then number 6 is lack of empathy, and I think this is one of the big ones. And this says one of the most defining traits of narcissists is their inability to empathize with others. They have difficulty recognizing or caring about the feelings and needs of others. Therefore, this lack of empathy can lead to callous and insensitive behavior, causing emotional pain and distress for those around them. So they don't have any empathy, dude. It's just about getting their needs met. They don't really give a fuck what you need. You're a vessel. You're a tool for them to use to get what they want.
Yeah. Again, a fine line too. As evidenced by Roscoe wearing his "fuck your feelings" shirt on the show the other day.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's so hard, man. And we see all the time. We see this play out in stories, news stories that are out there of, husbands gaslighting their wives and vice versa. Corporations sending specific messaging, and South Park has a really great spoof on this about the sports drink and these influencers and whatnot. But it's actually really funny. I watched it on the airplane, was laughing out loud. I'm sure everybody sleeping fucking loved me. But as we go down this list, and when I first started reading this list, man, I started getting nervous, and I started thinking about, dude, am I a closet narcissist and don't know about it? Because my first reaction is not, come here, let me give you a hug. It's like, the fuck did you do wrong? It's like, I don't care how you feel about it. Let's get down to the root cause of it. And that's where I say, go back a few minutes ago when I said, I think maybe it's the brash exterior of the military man. Maybe it's, maybe it's just been hardened over time. I don't know. But my first reaction is not to try to figure out what you're feeling. My first reaction is to try to solve the problem. And we've talked about this before with our spouses, right? Sometimes they just need a hug, or they just need somebody to sit there and listen, where the whole time I'm just trying to solve the problem, right?
Yeah, well, again, that just goes back to that whole empathy and validation episode that we had, I don't know, a long time ago, right? But, empathy is just your ability to go put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand their point of view, right? And recognize that maybe even if you don't, validation too is validating that experience, even if you don't really understand it. But it's just being able to recognize what somebody else is going through, or even caring about, hey, we're going through this thing together. What's going on for you in this process? How do you feel about this? And so even though, you may put on the problem solving hat and have the military front that shows up, dude, you're an empathetic cat. Because think about the conversations that you and I have had over the last couple months, right? Where we disagree on certain things, right? You're still willing to listen. You're still willing to go, hey, maybe Cass has a point here. Maybe I should vet this a little bit, or maybe I should consider this a little bit.
Maybe I'm just looking for holes in your argument so I can poke them.
Well, that may be the case too. But the bottom line is, like, with a person who is a narcissist, like, there's no empathy involved, right? They don't care about your feelings. They don't care about how what they're doing is affecting you. They're just using you for whatever they need to meet their own needs.
Yeah, I think that's the key right there. Is it's all about their selfish behavior.
Yeah,
when it comes down to it, because I think so far, and I don't know how many more you have on your list. I'm looking at about, I don't know, 10 or 12 over here. But so far, at one point or another, we all probably have some of this.
Yeah.
There's.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we all demonstrate these traits probably at different times. I may be pissed at you and go, you know what? Fuck you, Roscoe. I'm not being empathetic with you. Am I a narcissist? No. In that moment, I may be demonstrating a narcissistic trait, but it doesn't mean I'm a narcissist, right? So
I hate how you exploit me too. It's terrible.
Oh, it's easy. So we can go through the rest of these pretty quick. So because they all kind of build on each other. They're all kind of self-explanatory, but arrogant and haughty behaviors are attitudes, right? So they have this high self worth of this. They have this high viewpoint of themselves,
Mhm.
right? Big egos. They don't like criticism at all.
Well, that's not fair because who really does like it?
Well, but
You know?
but dude. So there you go, though, right? So you want to talk about a narcissist, and this is why a narcissist wouldn't survive in a fighter squadron. You get fucking criticism and feedback every day, all day long, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you got to weed out what's good feedback and bad feedback. But narcissists, because they typically have that fragile self-esteem, they do not like criticism at all.
Yeah, this is something
Um,
that well, underneath I have that on here too on my list, but it's labeled defensive reactions instead of unable to take criticism or doesn't like criticism is the way that you phrased it. Well, nobody likes criticism. Like I don't like it when people tell me my stuff sucks, you know. But if I reacted with anger, rage, or defensiveness, then that's a little bit of a different story.
well, and I think the underlying piece of it is you may not like criticism, but you're willing to take feedback. A narcissist doesn't take feedback. There's no personal growth
Yeah.
associated with it, right? They
Um,
don't want negative feedback. Period.
Unsolicited feedback is that's a different animal. If you're just
Yeah.
walking down the street and somebody stops you and says, "Hey man, your hat's fucking stupid." Like,
But
that's different than, "Hey Cass, will you read this and give me your thoughts?"
yeah,
You
but a
know?
narcissist would be like, well, I didn't ask for that feedback, and oh, by the way, I'm this kind of person, and I
Yeah.
should be treated this way, and I'm
Yeah.
this self-important, and so this person's that none of that. Like
I paid
they won't take
$20
any
for
of
this hat. What are you
They
talking
won't
about?
pay.
Yeah.
They will take none of that, right? So
Yeah. The other piece that goes along with that too is not just the unwillingness or the anger towards feedback; it's shifting that blame to someone else. I'm
lack of
sure you got that on
accountability.
your list.
Yep, lack of accountability.
Yep. Never take accountability, no ownership involved. Rather than say, okay, copy shot, good feedback. You say, well, no, it wasn't I didn't know.
Wasn't my fault.
And we've seen this in debriefs especially with like young kids who, you know, they try, I think it's just human nature to try to, I don't know, cover up, or if we can just get past this really quick, they won't notice that I shot outside of shot doctrine, you know, or whatever it is. I made a mistake. And if we play at 5 times speed, maybe he won't see it, but fuck, he stopped the tape. Oh, he's gonna, you know, maybe I can still weasel my way out of it a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Total lack of accountability. So, they also are, the other one I have on here too is superficial relationships, right? So they're never going to go deep, right? Because you're not, well, one, they lack empathy, so it's it's tough to build a relationship with anybody if you can't be empathetic. But two, that's not their interest. Their interest isn't to build a deep relationship for a couple of different reasons. One is because I think that often they see people as tools or vessels to move them to whatever the next evolution of themselves is. You know, so maybe, you know, maybe uh, I'm not going to go down that road. I'll stop right there. But they're pretty shallow people. The other part of that though too is because they lack self-confidence. I don't think they're even capable of having a deeper relationship with someone, right? Because it's not about the other person at all. It's about them, right? It's about getting their needs met. It's about getting their affirmation. It's about getting their validation. It's not about you. It's about them.
Yeah, and that's again, that's a fine line too. Katie's going through some real bad back pain right now, and you know, she's had some medical ailments for quite a few years, and it's really hard. It has been really hard for me to empathize with her because I'm just not a super outwardly emotional guy, for better or for worse. Wuzzy wug, what you see is what you get. Sorry. But I don't have those ailments, so it's hard for me to imagine what she's going through. And when she says she's in a lot of pain or she doesn't feel great, I'm sitting here going, man, the sun's out, got a little bit of a breeze. I'm going for a long run, you know, like I feel really good, you know?
Yeah.
But with the back pain stuff, I know exactly what she's feeling. And when she starts describing it, I was like, dude, I spent so many years sitting right there where you are that I legitimately feel bad for her because I know how bad that sucks.
Yeah, exactly. You talked about gaslighting. They're manipulative, right? So they're skilled manipulators. Well, and I've got a whole section
Yeah.
on gaslighting to kind of actually describe what that means. But they play the victim. They're obsessed with status and appearance. I've seen this before.
From a guy that drives $100 car.
Seek out material possessions, titles, and associations. So it's not. And I've seen parents do this with their kids, right? And you've probably seen it too as a coach, right? They're happy with their kids as long as their kids are supporting some great outward image that they have of themselves. But as soon as the child's not doing that, they're in the doghouse, man.
Yeah.
And so, or I need the bigger house. I need the more expensive car. I need a bigger ring on my finger. There's like these symbols of status that they associate with themselves that they think is somehow going to make people see them as something bigger or better than they are, right? It all goes back to that idea of grandiose and all of that stuff, right?
You know what's funny, man, is I think, we go back to the generational talk that we were just having a little bit ago. And I know for my kids, it's very difficult for them to understand the hard work and sacrifice that went into building the life that Katie and I have. And it's not grandiose by any means. Like, we're perfectly fucking middle class. Like, I have a nice truck, but it's because I earned it and I paid for it for, I don't know, 6-7 years, however long it took me to pay it off. But we did so much of that before our kids were born that they just don't know, or when they were very, very little. They don't remember 6 nights a week and all day Sundays me going to the library and studying. And not being at home and not being able to do things like coach baseball and t-ball and shit like that because I had focus on, finishing school. And while I was doing that, Katie was sacrificing, staying at home and raising the kids, so it's tough for us to communicate that to them in a way that they can really grasp how much work it took to build what we have now. And that goes kind of into that sense of entitlement just a little bit. And, I was reminded of this, this episode that I saw the other day. A gentleman finally gets over the hurdle that he was facing, and he achieves the goal that he had set, and he achieves some level of status, right? Well, then the woman attaches herself to him, not because she loves him, not because she likes him, but because she wants to bask in that ray of sunshine.
Yeah, the status.
Right? She wants to go to PTA meetings and say, well, my husband is a fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Well, my kids are fill in the blank, and that's, I think, where the line is different. It's one thing, to enjoy the spoils of your spouse's hard work and dedication. It's quite another to steal the glory for your own personal gain.
You saw it in the military, right? The wives that wore their husband's rank, right? So
Colonel, Mrs. So-and-so.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, anyways, so those are some of the traits. How to recognize it. Let's shift to that, right? So, a couple of things. Conversation dominance. A narcissist is going to consistently steer the conversation back to them and their achievements, right? They want the spotlight on them.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, but let me tell you about me, kind of a thing, right? Boundary violations, and this is a huge one, right? They are going to disregard and challenge any boundary you set. And I'm going to talk a little more specifically about this because I've had some experience with narcissists. And the biggest thing with so boundary violations, they typically, because this is one of the things that you have to do with a narcissist, is you have to, or somebody that's demonstrating narcissist traits, is you got to draw very firm boundaries. But they're going to take that boundary drawing as rejection. right? They're going to take that as you rejecting them. They're not going to take it as you trying to maintain a line in the sand so that you can have a healthy relationship with the other person. They take it as rejection often. And then what do? They escalate because they want to see, well, if you draw that line in the sand, how far can I push it back? And it's really hard to manage and to deal with. Emotional manipulation, they'll use guilt and shame or praise. Gaslighting is a huge one, and I'm going to talk specifically about gaslighting here and give some examples if you're ready for that. So guilt and shame, though, is a big one too, right, dude? Yeah. So, all right. So gaslighting, because this is another term that gets thrown around a lot socially and culturally right now. And basically all gaslighting is manipulation. At its root, it's manipulation. But it's manipulation in the sense that the person involved is going to twist and distort reality to make you doubt your own perception of something, your own perception of what happened, your own memory of something that happened, right? Or even your own sanity. So, they'll deny about events that happened. They'll lie about past conversations. They'll be dismissive about your feelings. The goal is to erode your confidence and sense of self so that they can be dependent and continue to manipulate. So here's some examples, right? Denying events that happened. You're making that up. I never did that. I never said that to you. Right? I never said that. I never told Sherry she was a bitch. She told me I was a bitch. Right? They distort reality to make you actually doubt your own remembrance of an event. And then you go, well, fuck, man, maybe Sherry did call you a bitch. Maybe it wasn't the other way around, right? And that's gaslighting. Lying to change the narrative. I never said that. You misunderstood me. I didn't mean that when I said that. That's gaslighting. Blaming the victim, right? You made me do that. You told me you're the one that made me do that. I wasn't going to do that, but you made me do that.
If you wouldn't have called me a bitch, I wouldn't have called her a bitch. Yeah.
You're being too sensitive. It's not that big of a deal, right? They trivialize the victim's feelings. It's just a joke. Don't be so dramatic. It shouldn't upset you that much, right? Those are the kinds of things. That's gaslighting. Accusing somebody of being mentally unstable in the sense of you're crazy, you need to get your head straight. You don't even know what you're talking about. That kind of thing. Isolating the victim from their support network. Your friends are really bad influences, and I don't think you should hang out with them anymore because they're telling you that, she's crazy, dude. You need to get the fuck away from her, right? Or you can't see them without me. I've seen this before too, right? You can't see them without me. And the reason that a narcissist will say that is because they want to be able to control the narrative. They want to be present in the room to make sure that the conversation, this is how, again, this is how grandiose they are, right? They think that if you go somewhere, everybody's going to be talking about them.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And in order to make sure that you're not told something that they don't want you to know, they want to be there so that they can try to control the narrative. Like that lack of control for them to be able to control your perception is so important that they'll do those things.
That's well beyond like FOMO too, because I've seen that. I've seen that play out in real time where an individual forces themselves into a situation where they weren't invited because they needed to know what was going on. They deep down inside of them, they yearned to know what was going on. And it wasn't about them. Like nothing was about them. It couldn't have been further from the truth. Like
right?
Whether that person was there or not, like, dude, it didn't matter, and it didn't come up. And
no, but that's that grandiosity and that sense of being special. Like if he goes or she goes, they're going to talk about me.
Mm.
And I don't want them to say I don't want anything bad to be said. So I'm going to, even though I'm not invited and I'm not even welcome, I'm going to show up so I can control that.
How about this one? And I've seen this one too, kind of in the same lines, but I think it goes into one of the other ones that you mentioned though. Cass, your high school reunion's coming up and your ex-girlfriend's going to be there. Would Alicia let you go by yourself to that? Yeah. Well, I know a person who there's no fucking way that would fly.
Right.
There's no fucking way I'm letting you go. Like I got a text message a couple of weeks ago asking if I was going to come to the annual fraternity graduates get together in Alabama. And I haven't been in 30 years. So I don't know. I mean, these people, thank you for thinking of me, but I haven't been in 30 years. Probably not going to start now. Just saying. I do still have my fraternity badge, so I could show up. But I was sitting there kind of daydreaming about going back and having a beer with the guys, dudes I haven't seen in 30 years. Half of them I don't even recognize anymore. And I don't know what stories I would tell, but I could only imagine what it would be like for Katie if my ex-girlfriend showed up. And I don't think she would. She's I don't even know where she's at now, but I don't think she's affiliated with anyone that I know down there. But what would happen? I wonder how Katie would take that.
Yeah.
Katie would 100%. She would let me go on my own. She'd be like, yeah, fine. I don't want to go back to your old college days. She didn't know me back then. She didn't meet me until well after that. So I don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
But that goes, there's a lot of trust there. And
sure.
And she
I'll
knows
give you an
that
example
she
too,
knows bygones are bygones, but a narcissist person who great example too, is she didn't know me then.
Yeah.
A narcissist would be like, there's no fucking, I'm not letting you out of my sight, dude. Because I don't know, you go back there and you change into another person and who knows what you're going to do.
I'll give you an example too. I had a friend who was married to a person that demonstrated narcissistic traits. And after their divorce, it was Christmas time and he was going to take the kids over to his family group on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day for a little Christmas thing. Well, she would not, she went with him. She would not go, even though she was not invited. She wasn't even welcome to be there, but she showed up. She went anyway. She forced herself into the situation because she was so worried that, people were going to talk bad about her, especially with the kids there, that she wasn't going to let that happen. Right. I've seen it too, where another friend whose wife had an affair had one of his kids with him and was going to send that child to the grandparents' house for Thanksgiving. Hadn't seen the grandparents in a long time. Grandparents had reached out, thought it would be kind of a neat thing for the child to go spend time with the grandparents, right? So sends him over there. Wife, narcissist, freaks the fuck out because she had no idea that it was kind of a last minute thing, didn't know it was going to go down, and was so concerned about what. So this particular woman had an affair, had lied about having the affair to all the kids, had been running that lie for several years. And she was so worried that she was going to be exposed for that lie when the child went out to that grandparent's house for Thanksgiving and was around other family members that they actually came clean to lead turn it because they couldn't control the narrative anymore. Right. So that's the kind of
funny
stuff we're talking about. Right.
It's also, I've seen it also play out almost that same exact scenario, slightly different, but almost the same, where they do force themselves in and the conversation ends up turning to them because they showed up. And then they feel like shit because it all comes out. Like if you hadn't even showed up, we'd have been talking about marshmallows. Like nobody gave a fuck, but you wanted it, you asked for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. All right. So that's gaslighting. So here's how to deal with narcissistic behavior, right? So if you recognize these traits in somebody, obviously not everybody's going to have narcissistic personality disorder. But if you see these traits in somebody, especially if it's a relationship, just run away. No, I'm just joking. You may not be able
Burn
to
the house
but
down. It's easier to
yeah,
deal with.
yeah. You got to set firm boundaries. We've talked about boundaries before, and boundaries are hard, man. Especially if you're in a relationship with somebody you care about. Boundaries are very difficult to set. And I think that they're even more difficult to set with somebody that's narcissistic because, like I said, they're gonna view it as rejection. It's gonna lead to them spiraling a little bit and escalating, and then they're gonna just try to continue to test the new boundaries. So you have to be very firm in your boundaries. So like what's an instance of a boundary? Let's say you're in a relationship, or let's say maybe you got out of a relationship with somebody who is a narcissist.
Yeah.
You know, and you're getting the fucking hate texts, or the hate emails on a regular basis. And you're like, okay, look, I don't mind having a conversation. Maybe you had kids or whatever, right? And then you get divorced. And so you have to have conversations with this person because you have shared children. But maybe every time they send you a text, there's always these little digs in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could just simply go, look, here's the boundary. Like I'm willing to have conversations with you around anything that the kids are going through, but that's it. Like, don't ask me about my personal life. Don't throw spears. If you're gonna have, if any of your stuff includes a vicious personal attack, I'm not going to respond to it. Or if it continues to happen, you can just go, you know what? If you have an issue, you can email it to me. If you continue to send me hate-filled text messages, I'm going to block you on my phone.
Here's one thing you got to look out for when you do that, right? And I've seen this recently, is you set clear boundaries. There's going to be a requisite amount of backlash from that, from the narcissist person. They are. They're gonna ratchet up their name calling, maybe even their actions. But if you hold firm to that boundary, they will likely back off and pout for a little while.
Yep.
They're like, well, I'll show you. I'll give you silent treatment. Well, when that doesn't work, guess what they resort to? Well, I didn't mean it. I love you. And they go back to the gaslighting and the manipulation, and they try to suck you back in. So it's almost like it's a cycle. It really is. It's a cycle. And when you deal with an individual long enough, you see the pattern.
Yeah. Well, and Roscoe, it's difficult in like personal relationships or groups of friends or family too, because one thing that a narcissist will do is when you set boundaries, they are going to triangulate somebody else in to try to put pressure on you to do what they want.
Yeah.
So what's triangulation?
Yeah.
Triangulation is they're the victim, you're the persecutor.
I'm going to recruit this guy to my side.
They're going to recruit a willing rescuer, and they're going to go, oh my gosh, Cass is such an asshole. He did all this shit to me, blah, 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 blah. Will you please talk to him about it? And now all of a sudden you're getting text messages from people who aren't even part of this conversation going, dude, you really need to fucking knock it off. You need to do X, Y, and Z.
And you're like,
dude, what the fuck are you talking about, right? So they will triangulate. And what sucks about that is no matter what you do, they're going to make you out to be the bad guy.
Yep.
Or girl.
Well, that's where, but hold up. This is where
that's how they pull people to their side.
This is why it's important for us as individuals. We did that little beta group with a group of guys, right?
Yep.
And one of the hidden inlying messages in there is we are a support group. You can throw in here whatever you want, dude, for your judgment. I got you, man. I may not agree with it, and maybe I can offer you some advice.
Yeah.
But don't feel like, you can do this.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're here for each other.
Right? The whole point in doing all that was to build your self-esteem up, to make you a confident person, to make you think independently and not rely on somebody else's validation for doing something. Like, well, if I do this, maybe they'll think higher of me. No, fuck that, dude. Do it because you want to do it, and do it well because you want to do things well, right? So when this narcissist starts doing that shit to you, dude, the best thing you can do is just Okay. And stand your ground, man. Be confident.
And realize,
trust your decisions.
yes, you have, and you have to stick with that boundary, man. You can't move it, because that's just what they're looking for.
Yep.
Because and you have to recognize too, we've talked about this on other podcasts, but not in this context, but they're cognitively rigid people, right? There is black and white, there is right and wrong, there is their side and your side. And anybody who's not on their side is enemy, and anybody who's on your side is enemy, right? And so they will try to pull people to their side because it's very black and white for them, right? I'm right, you're wrong. I'm good, you're bad. It's very simple.
God, I just have this nagging thought in the back of my head that you watch the Fox News all day today. Like, you're describing politics in America right now.
Yeah, no doubt, right? Instead of finding some middle ground
on both sides, yeah.
Well, the funny thing about politics in America today is, honestly, we all pretty much want the same things. It's just a disagreement on the execution of how to get there.
I agree with that, and I don't even know if we can classify it as politics anymore, man. It's more it's more just entertainment and showmanship now.
It's power politics, is what it is. So.
Who can create the most outrage? That's not politics.
No.
It's, if I can enrage this demographic more than the other guys can, then I can get what I need.
So they'll vote for me.
Them. Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah. And that's not politics. That's
just
fucking
bullshit.
Gaslighting, and that's placating, and that's narcissistic behavior.
Yeah. One of the other things you can do in dealing with it is practice emotional distance. So, dude, if you recognize this, the sooner you can pull yourself out of being entangled or invested emotionally, and just not even care about the drama or the manipulation, the better off you'll be. And some of that starts with setting firm boundaries, and then when you set firm boundaries, who cares what the reaction is? I will tell you, in having dealt with narcissistic people, when they reach out and are berating you or they want a reaction out of you. Like, they have so much anxiety because of their lack of self-respect or their own lack of self-worth, that they have a ton of anxiety. And typically when they're engaging, it's because they need an outlet to drop that anxiety on, right? They need something to blame. They need something to be the issue, right? They're looking for an outlet. And if you just don't respond,
Yeah.
that is perfectly legit, right? Just don't even get wrapped up in the drama or that emotional manipulation they're trying. Just don't even respond.
Yeah.
And if you need to, just fucking block them so you don't even have to see it or deal with it anymore.
I think I said it on the last show that when you get to a point in your life where you truly don't give a shit what other people think, and you can just walk away, like, that's powerful, man. Because then nobody has control over your emotions anymore. Nobody can play that card to you anymore, because you're just like, whatever, dude. I'm gonna do me. You know?
And like, I had an individual in my life at one point in time who I had some dealings with, and they had some narcissistic tendencies, and I was getting hate text on a daily basis or whatever, right? And I was just like, look, if you keep this up, I'm blocking you. Like, the next one you send me that has any of this shit in it, I'm blocking you on my phone. And then, what's the response I get? The same shit, right? So I block them. And like 3 months later, I get an email, or I can't remember if it was an email or a phone call, but it's like, why are you not responding to my text messages anymore?
I told you.
They couldn't even fathom the fact that I actually blocked them on my phone.
That you actually did.
I'm like, I haven't gotten a text message from you since I told you I was going to block you when you kept doing the shit you were doing. So
it's because their arrogance was probably saying in the background, oh, he won't block me.
Yeah,
I'm too important.
I'm too important.
Yeah. He won't block me.
So, but practicing emotional distance is good. If it's in a professional setting, which I don't know. I think these things can definitely play out in a professional setting. I think it's a little harder to define, maybe. I think a lot of this stuff applies more to probably personal relationships, but document stuff if you need to. And then the bottom line is, at the end of the day, dude, you got to focus on you. You got to take care of yourself. So your own mental and emotional well-being, right? So create the boundaries that you need to maintain to keep those things intact. If you need to see a therapist, see a therapist. If you're listening to this podcast and you're like, holy shit, I have all of these traits and characteristics, please go see somebody, because
right.
a therapist can help you. If you are a narcissist and you're just now recognizing it, they can help you with that, right? Because like I said, a lot of times it deals from a lack of self-worth, and a very fragile ego to begin with. And therapy can help you with that. So
yeah, for sure, man. I know I sound like a broken record sometimes when I say this, but it really is all about you, man. And everything that we talk about on our show comes down to making you a more confident, goal-oriented, self-sufficient, independent person. Right. And so if the listeners will take in some of the things that we talk about here and actually try it and actually apply it. And we could bring on shit, man. We know a handful of people now who have actually done it and can give us great evidence that it works. I mean, I've told my story. You've told your story. We've brought other people on the show, Francis, but gosh, man, once you get to a point where you're motivated and you have passion and you have goals and you're stepping out and you're finding balance in your life, once you get to that point, it doesn't matter what anybody else is saying about you. It doesn't matter. That's all external noise, man, because guess what? Your path is that way. Yeah. And there are going to be people that are trying to grab you by the shirt and pull you back occasionally. That's normal and natural. And I know I've mentioned this, like, they don't have to come with you. It's your path. It's your journey. Right. They don't have to come with you.
Yeah.
But it's the people who support you either way and go, hey, dude, I'm not willing to go on that path with you, but best of luck to you. I got your back. If you ever need me, holler at your boy. Right?
Yeah.
That's the guy you want. Right? You don't want the person that's going, well, Roscoe's a piece of shit because he's moving that way. He gave up on us because he wants to go and he's got all these fucking ambitions and he wants to write all these damn books and he forgot about us. Those aren't the people you want in your corner, man.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely true. Yeah, and the competition is between you and you. Don't worry about the other stuff, right? Like we talked about in one of the previous podcasts too. Like people are going to support you right up into the point where you move past them in a lot of cases, right? And then you're not going to have that same support anymore. So, yeah, just do your thing, man. Like you got your goal, compete with yourself towards getting it, fix the things that you need to fix around yourself to go there, be accountable, achieve those things with a certain amount of accountability and responsibility. But yeah, just keep pressing and don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the naysayers, the haters, and if you do have, if you happen to find that you are in a relationship with somebody that has some of these traits, man, start to set boundaries, see what you can affect or just look and see if especially if there's a lack of empathy. I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing, right? Is if there's a lack of empathy and then there's some kind of emotional, psychological manipulation that's constantly going on because this person just needs constant validation, or that gaslighting is continuous. Dude, I don't know what to tell you except if you can't get them help, get help for yourself. Go talk to a therapist about the appropriate boundaries to set or how to manage that. That's a tough place to be.
It is, especially if it's somebody close to you, somebody that you care about, somebody who's, deeply ingrained and involved in your life, in whatever manner, that's very hard. And I'm seeing this kind of play out, with some people that are close to me right now. And I know it's hard. I hope that they get to a point where they deal with it. I don't know if they will. I'm pessimistic about it because I've just seen the pattern repeat so many times, and it's not just me being a negative Nancy. It's evidence based.
Yeah,
and that's
that could be a lack of self-awareness on an individual's part too, though, right? If we're continuing to repeat a pattern and then wonder how we fucking got there. That's just there's a little bit of self-inspection that needs to go on.
Well, it's a two-way street too. Like the narcissist is going to repeat that pattern. It's a circle.
That's right.
They're going to do it.
Can't fall for the
they're
trap.
going to be mean, and then they're going to be sad, and then they're going to be the victim, and they're going to love you, and then they're going to be mean, and then they're going to be sad. But on the other side of the street, if you're putting up with it, if you're tolerating it, if you keep getting sucked back in, that too is a pattern. So if you can recognize that, then maybe you can do what you said, put up some of those roadblocks, put up some of those boundaries.
Got to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And dude, like we said before, setting boundaries is a really difficult thing to do in a relationship with somebody you care about.
Yeah.
I've had to do that in my life, and it sucks, man. There's people that I really care about who have a certain attitude towards me, and I get, there was an instance that happened a couple years ago with a person that I care a ton about, and I wasn't getting texts from them. I was getting texts from other people, and I was like, and right away, because I've recognized these patterns now, I'm like, all right, here comes the triangulation. Right? Victim, rescuer, I'm the persecutor. And so these other people are texting me, and I'm like, this is none of your business. And you just need to, you need to tell that person that if they want something, they need to talk directly to me. Right? Because in my life, in my relationships, I have conversations with people. It's a give and take. There's some reciprocity, and if you want something from me, or if you want to have a conversation around something, you don't go to somebody else to put pressure on me to get what you want. You just come talk to me, right?
Yeah.
And so this goes on for I'm not joking, dude. This goes on for 3 or 4 days with 2 or 3 different people texting me. And I'm like, oh, here it is, triangulation, right? Up to the point where time's getting, becoming an issue for what they want, right? And then I finally get a text. And it's if you don't do this by this time, then this is the result. And I'm like,
that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem.
Yeah. So you know what I did? I didn't respond. I didn't respond at all, because that's not how I'm going to be in relationship with people. All that person had to do is go, hey, I know we're not in the best place right now, but I would really appreciate it if you could do this for me. And I would have been like, you got it. No problem. No questions asked. But when you come at me with, you have until this time to do this, and if you don't, then I'm not going to do, you're never going to hear from me again. I'm never going to do this for you again. Whatever the case is, right? Whatever the litmus test is, right? Dude, that's not how I have relationships with people. I don't respond to that. So that was a boundary I set, and the time passed. So, but those are examples, right? That's a real world example of dealing with some of that stuff.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like we could go on telling stories about this, because it's common.
Sure,
it's so common.
It is.
It is common. And I mean, it is like,
yeah, and it's nuanced too, dude, because the difference between somebody who may be emotionally immature that has some of these traits, and just may not have a lot of self-awareness, to somebody who's no kidding, a full-blown narcissist, right? It's very nuanced, but
yeah, but I think when you look at when you look at the bulk of work, right? That's it, right?
The pattern consists.
You see these same patterns for over the course of years.
The pattern persists.
And then you go, all right, I got you pegged, right? Not one or two of these here or there,
every time.
Who hasn't been occasionally arrogant? Who hasn't sought validation and some accolade, and true. But when you see all of it over a long period of time, that bulk of work, I think, is really what separates it.
Yeah, when the pattern repeats itself. Alicia always says, when people do things, it's just information. Well, if they're doing the same thing over and over and over again,
yep,
that's good information. You know what I mean?
I sat through a debrief today. We did an 8-ship DCA, defensive counter air mission, and for an hour and 15 minutes, all he did was gather information. The leader, all he did was gather information. All right, there's a shot. Tick mark. Was it a valid shot? Nope. Tick mark. What was the result? Miss. Dash. And he did that for all however many fucking shots we shot in that vol. And then he added it all up and goes, we shot this many missiles. This many of them were invalid or outside of shot doctrine. This many of them were PK misses. I mean, he had it all because he stopped the tape and counted every single, and that's exactly what you're saying, man. It's just information. Now, what he did with that afterwards was he developed lessons learned and he developed debrief focus points out of it. But all he did was gather the information. He kept track of everything. He annotated it and he put it in columns. That's all he did.
Yeah. And I think it's hard. It's hard to stay objective in, emotional relationships sometimes, but try to stay objective and just take that information for what it's telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And set boundaries and see how they react. That'll tell you something too.
Yeah, for sure, man. And good luck because it's messy sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
None
of this is easy.
It's messy. And it's probably going to cause you some heartache at some point, especially if it's somebody close to you. If it's a friend of a friend, fuck it, walk away. Right. But if it's somebody who's close to you in your circle of 5 or a loved one or something like that, it can sting a little bit for sure.
For sure.
Wow. That was deeper than I thought it was going to be, so to speak. It was good.
All right, brother.
Good stuff.
Narcissism 101.
You should have 3 or 4 beers before every podcast.
There you go.
Yeah.
I should.
All right. What else you got, man?
That's it, man. How about you?
Yeah. Be the change.
Be the one.
Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.